Welcome back to the Bitcoin Reformation podcast, where we are two, but again, well, usually three, but two still pastors who love Jesus and yes, Bitcoin too. But today we're doing something we haven't done in a very long time that I am personally excited about, even if necessarily the product doesn't apply to me in my current state of life. But maybe we'll talk about that in just a little bit. But we're excited to bring on a guest with us. I'm not going to do the introduction for that. I'm going to actually toss it to David to allow him to introduce him. So David, who do we have with us today, and what are we going to talk about?
Yeah, we have Sanjay Mavinkurve. I said it beautifully before, but Mavinkurve with us. So Sanjay, thank you for being with us. Sanjay is going to share more about his background and himself, but I'll just introduce him right now as we talk with him. He is the co-founder and CEO of a company called Sovana, S-O-V-A-N-A, Sovana.io. And they have a what I'm going to call a Bitcoin product, or a Bitcoin powered product for all. Really, it's a new product. It has to do with leveraging equity of homes. We'll get to all that to get Bitcoin exposure. I would say, in a nutshell, though, the idea would be to empower people to possibly, this is what first comes to mind for me, put to bed a mortgage much more quickly than traditionally they have. At least that's my use case that I'm excited about. So we'll talk about that. Sanjay will introduce himself, the company, other use cases. So Sanjay, I want to give it over to you, though. Tell us about yourself, maybe generally where you're at in the world, where you're speaking to us from, about your background, and then we'll get to your company.
Yeah, absolutely. Great to be here. Thanks for having me, guys. So my background and my training, my professional experience has all been in computer science and software development. I was at Google for almost 2 decades. I joined right after college when it was certainly a much smaller company than it is today. I think when I joined, it was just around 1,000 people. This was in 2003 when everyone had to interview personally with Larry Page. And yeah, totally different time, right?
Right?
I think when I left, we had grown from about 1,000 to almost 200,000. So really got to observe that company evolve in quite a massive way, and be a small part of that myself. Over that time, I worked on a bunch of different projects. Probably the one that I'm most proud of would be Google Maps. I joined that team around the time of its founding and stayed on until we'd launched turn-by-turn navigation on your mobile phone. So, and worked on a whole bunch of things, as you might imagine, over a tenure that lasted almost 2 decades at Google. Around halfway through that tenure, I discovered Bitcoin. This is now around 2012. I remember still to this day the email that was sent to an email investing list that I was a part of, an email group that I was a part of. We just talk about investment ideas, whatnot. And I remember a very good friend of mine said one day in 2012, if you haven't yet started paying attention to Bitcoin, now is the time.
Amazing.
And in that email, he described the properties of Bitcoin. He didn't get into the technicals of how Bitcoin works from an implementation perspective, from a coding perspective. He just said, these are the properties of Bitcoin. He talked about the scarcity, the 21 million cap. He talked about the ability to send it across the wire instantly. He talked about its divisibility to 8 decimal places and so on. And I remember thinking, if these properties, A, are real, and B, if they endure, if they last, if they persist, this is one day going to underpin the global financial system. This is one day going to be the reserve asset used by sovereigns, central banks, corporates, and even individuals. Now, you might think like, okay, that's quite the leap to make from an email that just lists something you never heard of with, properties. But a bit of context there is I'm from India. David, to answer your question, I'm in Miami, coming to you from Miami right now.
Okay.
But originally I'm from India. And in India, we culturally, as a people, love gold.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
the reason we love gold, like people know about it, right? Like they say, and I think there's truth to one of the largest gold holder demographics in the world is Indian housewives, because that's like at every wedding, every occasion you can, we as a country, as a people, try to accumulate gold. And I don't think if you asked a random person down the street, why is it that we value gold in this country, I don't think they'd be able to give you a academic, intellectual argument necessarily. But my belief is that the reason is because we've had 10, 12% inflation in India per year for as far back as I can remember. And as a result, we viscerally understand that you got to get some of your assets into something out of the dirty hands of the government, right? That can't be debased, that can't be inflated, whose purchasing power can't be inflated away from you. And so when I saw that email in 2012, I was already a gold bug, right? I owned physical gold, right? Not GLD, the ETF, not GDX, a miner's play, right? Not poo-pooing those things, right? But I was like, I'm going to own the physical asset. And so when I saw that email, I remember thinking to myself, this is everything I love about gold without the shortcomings, without, you might argue, are the flaws of gold that led to its failure in some sense in doing what it did for 5,000 years, which is impose some discipline on governments and act as the reserve base layer to the global financial system. And so the primary of those shortcomings, those flaws of gold, being its physicality, right? The fact that gold is physical means I can't send it to you across a video call, across the internet, right? It means that because it's physical, when you hand me gold, I don't know what you've handed me. I would have to do a full analysis, whether that's using some sort of an X-ray or breaking it apart. So counterfeit becomes an issue. Because it's physical, it's not so easy to break off a piece to buy a loaf of bread or whatever it is that you need. Because it's physical, it's not easy to flee your country, your regime, if, God forbid, it comes to that, as folks in Iran are learning, right? As folks in other countries across the world have experienced over time. And so all of gold's flaws really are downstream of its physicality. And I remember thinking, Bitcoin is everything I love about gold, but in digital format. And since then, I've been on this is where I share a lot with every other Bitcoiner out there, which is I'm on a mission, a deeply personal mission. Like, this means a lot to me, of trying to get everyone I know and their dog to understand Bitcoin, appreciate Bitcoin, and make an allocation to Bitcoin.
I really appreciate that background. And I got to say, in 2012, you had better friends than I had at that time. Nobody emailed me about Bitcoin. I wish they had. But I think Jared and I know that, or my wife knows that. How about that? Like, we're headed this place. Please don't talk about Bitcoin. Please don't. Or we'll leave a place and I'll say, they brought it up. They brought it up.
Yes.
So, we know that. But you're right. I don't know your religious background at all, Sanjay. For Jared and I, as Christians, and I suppose this is anybody maybe with a belief system, if you believe it's not just some sort of hyper-personal good news, but if you think what has been shared with you is good for all, then, what kind of person doesn't have eagerness then to share that with people? Our greatest eagerness would be certainly the gospel of Jesus Christ. That's not what we're talking about this time. But you've heard of Bitcoiners being called evangelists, which means to share the good news. We would call it small g, small n good news. But it is good news for us, for our children, for our neighbors. I'm curious whether, and this will be a sad thing, if in coming years, if more Americans have a visceral experience like you described for hard assets because of enduring inflation. I pray not, but it could be that what you have in your family and national background now comes to the West even more. And if it takes that to give people hunger, well, I hope they get that hunger quickly and then find it as well. So 2012, you find out about it. If you would, keep telling us, and you're still at Google, so you're like Google guy, but off to the side, you're getting excited about Bitcoin. What does the path look like then? And did you evangelize anybody at Google? Did you get anybody at Google? Great.
Absolutely. Yeah. All great stuff to get into. I will say quickly though, David, totally hear you on that's where I am too. I will answer questions on Bitcoin very, very happily. But I am less sort of in your face about it, right, at least relative to where I was in 2012. But I would say like in 2012, nobody knew about Bitcoin. Right. Like you never heard about it. And so in some sense, I felt a duty to spread the good word because I felt like there were no resources. There were no books. There was no YouTubes. There were no podcasts where someone can learn about Bitcoin, right? And so I felt like I'm lucky, however Bitcoin came to me, I'm lucky and I should pass that on. But in the intervening 14 years, still very happy to, but there are a lot of resources out there for Bitcoin. And so if someone's done that initial bit of homework on at least building a level of curiosity, a level of questions, then I'm happy to be like, all right, let's grab some coffee and talk further. So totally hear you on that. Not volunteering it as much now. So in 2012, so I just, I was at Google. I would remain at Google for another decade after that. I loved Google, by the way, just such a fantastic company. At least in the first 15 or so years after that, and not to get too deep into this, you guys remember, right, around 2015, 16, the Great Awakening took a grip on the country in a way that I think startled a lot of people. And that, anyway, that could be a whole different, be a whole different podcast. But I, continued working at my job at Google that I loved, and on the side was evangelizing Bitcoin. I did try at Google as well, but it was very hard to be taken seriously when you mentioned Bitcoin back then. And I would argue even today, as far as we've come, I don't know if you've read the article written by Jesse Myers. He went by the pseudonym Croesus at the time, but he wrote an article called Why the Yuppie Elite Don't Get Bitcoin, or Why the Yuppie Elite Dismiss Bitcoin. Are you guys familiar with this article?
Yes. I don't know that I've read it in total, but I've heard conversations about it, and I think laid eyes on it once. But go ahead.
Yeah.
Walk us through
it's one of my favorite. It's one of my favorite pieces on Bitcoin, and it tries to explain why is it that otherwise smart people seem to not only not get Bitcoin, but seem to dismiss it. And its conclusion is that to understand Bitcoin, you need two things. A, you need to be reasonably intelligent. Right? You don't have to be a rocket scientist, but you got to be a reasonably smart guy. And second, and this was the real insight, is that you have to have a healthy skepticism of authority, of establishment, of conventional wisdom. If you're too sort of part of the establishment and the existing, structures of authority, of the prevailing orthodoxy have given you a great life, like you went to business school, you worked at like Goldman Sachs, whatever. You trust too much everything you're told because it worked for you. Yep. His thesis that is that it worked for you, right? Believing in the system, doing as you're told worked for you, and you are doing well now, and therefore, you buy that we need 2% inflation. You buy everything that we're told, and you need that healthy level of, anti-authoritarian might be a little bit too far, but you need a healthy level of skepticism and questioning, like, hey, maybe everything I'm being told isn't right. And those two things come together to form an understanding of Bitcoin. But anyway, back to the story. Just that's what I bumped into at Google, like too many folks who the system was just working too well for them.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and that's why I really like what Andreas Antonopoulos, a very early Bitcoiner, and someone to whom I credit my own sort of early part of my journey in understanding Bitcoin. One thing he said when he was talking about Bitcoin is when he talks to folks in certain developing countries that are experiencing inflation, that are experiencing capital controls, where one day you can go to the bank and you can't get your money out. He said, when I talk to folks in those countries about Bitcoin, he said, when I talk to folks in America who we're blessed, we're lucky that, things are pretty good, right? Things are pretty great in America, particularly with our currency, right? As much as we might complain about the dollar and its loss of purchasing power, like compared to the rest of the world, things are pretty darn great here. And I'm certainly extremely thankful for that. And so when he said, when you tell Americans about Bitcoin, they say, why? Why would I? But when I tell folks in the developing world about Bitcoin, they say, how? How do I get in on this? Like, how do I acquire this? And so that also gets to sort of this, if you're in certain spheres, if you inhabit certain spheres, it's just very hard to grok Bitcoin. And that's what I experienced a lot of. I think recently, as Bitcoin has developed more of a track record, it's also really hard to evangelize something that's 3 years old.
Right.
Anything can
in
happen.
2012, my goodness.
Right.
True.
Right.
Much less 16 or so now. Yeah, 16, 17 years still seems wildly young. I have, let's see, 3 of my 4 children are older than that, So, yeah, it's.
How old are your kids, by the way, David?
22, 19, 17, 16.
Okay, very nice. So
Yeah,
we
fact,
overlap on the tail end. I have my eldest are 16-year-old twins.
Oh, nice, very nice. Yeah, I tell my youngest, who was born I'm sorry, not my youngest son, November 1st, 2008. That was the day after the white paper. So I was like, your whole life, the white paper has been there by your life plus a day. Yeah, so you overlap. You've got kids in that age. Okay, moving forward, then I'll just share with me. I'm 48. I've still got 20 years left on a mortgage. We have a beautiful home. We got it at a wonderful time. We're blessed in many ways, but I also don't want to have this mortgage for the next 19 years. Worse than that, is our 22-year-old just graduated from university. He's back in the Midwest, kind of working a passion job for the summer, which we applauded. Go do it, please go do it. And then he's looking, to start a career. And yet I've been more worried about housing for this kid, for instance, the cost of housing, than getting a job. Although that's a great question mark these days, also due to other pressures. And then Jared, can you share a little bit where you're at in terms of your housing situation?
Sure. Yeah. So, Sanjay, I have 3 kids. They're going to be 5, 3, and 1 here. So I'm on the other age. We
Other
had
side.
our first eldest did her pre-K graduation this past week, and it was like, wow, how is she already this old? And so I asked people there, like, try and imagine what it's like when they're going to be a high schooler, and you should have seen all the people's faces. They're like, what? Like, I can't even imagine what that's going to be like. So I can't even imagine what it's like to have kids that age. But anyway, we moved here where I live, now, a year and a half or so ago. The place I had previously served as pastor, they offered me a parsonage, and so it's a thing the church owns. I just get to live in it for free, and it's a benefit they give to me, that sort of thing. But here, there's not one of those, and so as part of my salary, they give me money to go and buy or rent a house. But having no equity from where I came to where I am now, we rent. And so I am very interested in the idea of home ownership. I don't know. It's one of those, is this still part of the American dream, right? Is this still the vision of the good life? There's a lot of things I know that we would do to the place we live in if we were to actually own it. But like a lot of good millennials, I'm on like the tail end of a millennial. So I was born in 93, almost a Gen Z. But I'm also don't know how I'm going to get to that place, especially without Bitcoin. So I feel like I'm in a little different place now, knowing that I do have Bitcoin and all those sort of things. But before those days, I mean, I wasn't necessarily thinking about a house, but I would imagine, like, how on earth, especially with 3 kids now entering school, am I ever going to get to a place like that? So when I said earlier, my stage of life is not I have equity in a house, because I have no equity in a house at all. And in fact, most of that, goes to my landlord, and he gets to do whatever he does with all of those sort of things. So that's my situation, my housing place, if you will, right now.
And I've got 18 years or so on Jared. So I've been in home ownership a bit longer. And then honestly, just due to some of the chances of the markets, I've had advantageous moments of home ownership when many haven't. The very equity I have is great for me and my wife, but is kind of part and parcel with the overall market, the financialization of homes and housing that stands against my children's generation, at least. And I think you as well, Jared, as you speak to it. So, having said that, and having robbed it from you, Sanjay, I want to give it back to you. And you're coming closer to the moment. You're coming forward. How do you get from Google to where you are now? Was there anything in between? And if there's not, then take us away in terms of what you're up to now.
Yeah, when I left Google, I knew I wanted to devote the rest of my life to Bitcoin, and in particular to continuing what I had been doing for the last 14 years then, which was bringing people into Bitcoin, providing people an on-ramp into Bitcoin. And that's what led me to Sovana. Really just a mission I felt of trying to get people to allocate to Bitcoin. And all my friends will tell you this is all I do, in dinner parties and whatnot. So there was also a personal experience. In 2022, I saw Bitcoin collapsing from 70, which was the previous all-time high, and it would ultimately go to a low of 15K. About halfway through that crypto winter, I remember thinking to myself, I have to buy more Bitcoin. And I remember also thinking to myself, I have no liquidity. I have no money to buy Bitcoin. But I did have a property that was fully paid off. And I thought to myself, what if I tapped into the equity? So I got a cash out refinance. The cash out refinance costs thousands of dollars a month. I'm paying it to this day. And I realized that it's not so easy to tap into the equity in your property. You could be sitting on hundreds of thousands of dollars of equity in your property, but it's out of reach because to tap into it would require a monthly debt service payment that you're unable to make. And so that was the first light bulb. And the second was, after I did that and bought Bitcoin using the equity in my property, I saw it get cut in half. And so now I'm sitting on a huge loss on borrowed money, which can be a source of stress. Now, to be honest, it didn't actually cause me stress because I'm just a high conviction Bitcoiner and I know where Bitcoin is headed. But I could imagine it would cause other people's stress. And so that was sort of two aha moments that came together and was the inspiration to Sovana. It might be helpful, David, if I got into just high level what Sovana is.
Do.
What is
Please do.
Yeah.
Can you start with the name? Give us the name.
Yeah,
first.
absolutely. Yeah. So Sovana is the name for our product. It derives from my belief, my very, very strong conviction that Bitcoin is above all and first and foremost a store of value. And that's where the SOV comes from. And because it is a store of value that is a bearer asset, you can hold it without relying on a custodian, without relying on a counterparty. It's like gold, right? It in my view, is one of the greatest tools we have for individual self-sovereignty. And that notion of sovereignty, SOV, is another derivation for our name, Sovana. And so our product is a product for property owners, for real estate owners, who are sitting on equity in their property and would like to divert some of that equity, would like to tap into some of that equity to make an investment in Bitcoin, a long-term, sober-minded investment in Bitcoin. But Sovana's superpower, our advantage, compared to what I did, which is get a second mortgage, is that we don't require a monthly payment. We enable you to tap into that property equity without having to worry about a monthly payment. And for that matter, without having to worry about any upfront payment. Let me describe the terms of Sovana, right? Let me describe what's in it for you, the property owner. Based on how much equity you have in your property, we qualify you for some maximum investment size. And it depends on how much equity you actually have and how much debt you have on your property and so on. Let's say, by way of example, you qualify for a $100,000 investment. The first step is that Sovana, we, using our money, we buy $100,000 worth of Bitcoin and we set it aside. We set it aside in a segregated, dedicated account for you, for this one deal. So we got $100,000 worth of Bitcoin, it sits there. It sits there for the entire duration of the term. The maximum term length is 5 years. But you, as the customer, can end early at any time with no penalty. You're always in control. When you do end the term, whether that's 5 years later or before, the way we settle is as follows. We take a look at the value of that investment. It started out at 100K. If it's gone up, we split the profit with you 50-50. So if the 100K of Bitcoin ends at 150K, we write you a check for half of that profit. So you'd get a check for 25K. That's the happy scenario, right? What's the catch? What's the downside? So far, you haven't put a penny into this, and I'm writing you a check. Fantastic. Well, the catch is that if at the end of the term, the value of the investment's down, so the 100K is now at 80K, you have to make me whole. You have to write me a check for that shortfall. So in a nutshell, it's you get half of the upside, you get half of the profit, but in exchange, if it does go down, you're covering all of the downside. So, is that a great deal? It is if you believe in Bitcoin.
Right.
It is if you understand Bitcoin, right? If you're afraid of Bitcoin, you're going to run away, right? But if you believe over the long term, as Bitcoiners, we have no idea what it's going to do tomorrow. We have no idea what it's going to do a week from now, right? Even a month from now. But as you get further out, as we like to say, time in the market, not timing the market, as you get further out, we have more and more confidence as Bitcoiners that Bitcoin's going to go up. And 5 years is a good chunk of time for Bitcoin to do what Bitcoin does in the long term, in the long run. And so our customers are Bitcoin believers. These are all orange-pilled property owners who assign a very low probability to Bitcoin being down over the next 5 years. And so they see it as, sure, I'll take that risk. I'll cover that risk. If you're going to buy Bitcoin and give me half of the profit, I'll totally cover that risk. And so it's a product that I wish existed in 2022. Exactly, right? Like I set out to build something that I could recommend wholeheartedly to anyone who believes and understands Bitcoin. So that's half the product. I'll pause there for a moment if you have any questions before I jump into the other side of our product, which faces our capital partners.
Great. Well, 5 years. 5 years, I think, to Jared and I would sound really good, but some of our listeners might say, why 5 years? I mean, in general, you've explained it. The lengthening of time not just smooths out the volatility, but I've said, people... I've said this, Sanjay. People talk about volatility as if it's a bad thing, but I say a toddler has volatility and has skinned knees, but so does a geriatric person may have skinned knees as well. One of them is volatility to the upside. They're ascendant in strength and growth and life and vitality. And given enough years, it'll be all three of us as well. We'll be descendant. And that's not happy volatility on that other end of life. So let's not just label volatility as if it's bad. I would look at Bitcoin and say, boy, it's well, you knew it at 3 years old. I came in when it was about 10 years old. And now we're like 16. It is volatile, just like the children we parent, volatile. But in those early years, when all's going well, it's volatility to the upside. They're growing. They're gaining strength. And like I said, vitality. So if your product was for a week or a month or a year, I'd probably run away. I hear 5 years and I say, oh, you've got my interest, because of what then Bitcoiners also often look at is, which is a great metric, is you look at Bitcoin over the 200-week moving average, which is right at 4 years, or just shy of 4 years. And there's very few moments in this whole 16, 17 years of Bitcoin where you're underwater holding Bitcoin at that point. You add to that what your team has built in, the ability for me, the customer, if I am the customer, to pull the trigger at any time, right? To say, boy, we're 3 years in and it's a bull market and this thing's ripping. I'd love to catch the very top. Few people ever can, but this feels like the top. And I'd talk with my wife, dear Megan, oh my goodness, look at this. This might be a good time. This might be a good time for us to put our agreement up to 5 years to bed at the 3.5 year mark. The 100,000 we put in is now worth, I'll call it, what was I was giving her the example the other day. Let's say 100,000, it becomes worth 300,000. Well, then the 300,000 minus the initial 100,000 and then half to me, half to your capital partners, means that by doing nothing, no extra payments, indeed putting our house up, some collateral there, certainly, but boy, we can retire now maybe $100,000 of our mortgage. I mean, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. So do you have anything more to say about that, or Jared have questions or thoughts on it?
Well, I'm curious how you landed on the number 5. In the Bitcoin world, we talk a lot about 4, and so I'm curious how you landed on 5.
So short answer, not some complicated formula. I wanted to offer as long a term as possible. In fact, if you watch my 10-minute announcement, we announced this at the Bitcoin conference in Vegas in 2025, and I talk about a 10-year term, We launched this product as a 10-year product. And only after speaking to capital partners did we shorten the term to 5 years. Because, and we'll get into the capital side of this in a moment, but what we're doing essentially is matching high conviction Bitcoiners willing to cover the downside with capital partners who want Bitcoin exposure but are afraid of the downside, right? These are capital partners who are super interested, super intrigued, and I would even say optimistic about Bitcoin. They understand at an intellectual level the arguments for why Bitcoin's going to become the global reserve asset. But they still have some level of anxiousness, nervousness, apprehension about all the risks that Bitcoin faces, and these are things that we've heard folks say for as long as we've been evangelizing Bitcoin, right? What if the government shuts it down? What if it's the MySpace of social networks and it's overtaken by the next thing, the bigger, better Bitcoin? What if quantum threats, kill? There's any number of reasons why an investor who doesn't understand Bitcoin like you and I do will be nervous about it. And to them we say, hey, look, we have a product here that allows you to enter this asset that you've been eyeing for a while now. You've been sort of tiptoeing around the edges for a while now. We allow you to take the plunge, but with a safety net of that downside protection. And they're going, how you doing that? And we say, well, we've got high conviction Bitcoiners on the other side of this, and I'm one of them, by the way, who are only more than happy to have you invest and take half of the upside, right? And so that's, if I may say so, that's sort of the magic of what we're building here, is bringing together conviction without capital. Conviction without capital is the property owner, and capital without conviction is our capital partner. And by bringing them together, we unlock, right? We unlock more capital and more people entering Bitcoin, and that's what this is all about.
It's very
and
interesting.
So the 10-year to 5-year is exactly that. As we were talking to capital partners, saying, "What do you think of this deal? Would you like it?" One of the things was, love everything about it, but 10 years is a long time.
Yeah, true.
I just think it's great. It sounds a lot like a coincidence of wants in some ways, right? Like you have two people who want very different things, but yet you find this beautiful almost marriage of, hey, we can meet your needs and your needs together, and now we have this great product to offer to other people. It's really neat that way.
I really love you invoking that. I have not thought of it in that way until just now, invoking the term that we as Bitcoiners, understand well, the coincidence of wants. I'm gonna take that and give you credit, but I'm gonna take that.
Yeah, absolutely. Please do.
It's tremendous. I find it such an exciting product. Okay, what's the reception been? And I'm sorry, did you now speak fully to your capital partners? Did we go there, or
we touched
more?
Sort of covered a lot of that. I will say that the inspiration on that side was just my experience in evangelizing Bitcoin for 14 years, right? At every dinner party, I'd have a lot of people who understood it intellectually. There was nothing more I could do or answer questions. Like, they got it, but there was still an apprehension, right? And so I thought, well, what if I could eliminate that apprehension by giving them a safety net? And it's a safety net backed with real property. And I want to be clear about this. When we originate one of these positions for you as a customer, for you as a property owner, we do put a lien on your home. We put a lien for the dollar value of the Bitcoin that we buy. So in the example of $100,000 of Bitcoin that we're buying for you, we put $100,000 lien on your home. Now, and that's to give our capital partners comfort and a rock solid guarantee that no matter what, they get their $100,000 back, right? That is the entire reason the capital's even working with us. Otherwise, if they wanted to buy Bitcoin, they can just go buy Bitcoin. The only reason they're buying Bitcoin, they're getting their exposure through Sovana, is because we tell them your downside is protected. And it's a rock solid protection.
Right.
A real property sitting somewhere with an enforceable lien against it. Now, in the upside scenario, if Bitcoin goes up by the end of whenever you end the term, we rip up that lien. But also if Bitcoin goes down and the customer does what they said they would do, right? If they keep their end of their bargain, if Bitcoin goes down and they write us that check to cover the shortfall, we also rip up that lien, right? The lien only comes into play if we need it to come into play.
That's all fair and wonderful. Yeah, I'm not your capital partner. I'm your eager, hopeful customer someday. How has it been received? What does the process look like with actual customers? And maybe you aren't willing to share how many of these you've done, and if you're not, that's fine. But if you could give us, kind of a rundown of how many years you've been actively now accomplishing this, matching this coincidence of once, I'd be curious about that.
So we're very new. The reason that I'm doing this podcast now and have spoken to a few other podcasters very recently, I think I started this like less than a month ago, is because we are now in a position where we're actually releasing folks off our wait list. It's sort of a big day breakthrough time for us. I'm not a market timer, but having been in this space for now a while, I've noticed these 4-year patterns, maybe you have too, and I purposely launched this at the time I did in May of 2025, thinking maybe, just maybe, if the pattern repeats, then by the time we've talked to our capital partners, secured enough capital to start funding, maybe, just maybe, it'll coincide with Bitcoin softening in price. And so we were very fortunate. I know it's funny to say fortunate when Bitcoin takes a 50% cut. But we were very fortunate that as we're starting to release people off the wait list and fund these positions, which, by the way, to answer your question, David, we are doing that now.
Wonderful.
We have capital and we have started releasing folks off of the wait list. We're just very fortunate that it ended up working out this way. I'm very, very happy to get folks into Bitcoin at these prices. It's not something that I've thought about deeply, but I do wonder if Bitcoin goes into a frothy phase like it's done in the past. Just thinking out loud here, I wonder whether I'm going to pause originations. I don't know. I don't want to be too paternalistic. If someone wants to take the deal, maybe they should take the deal. I'm a big believer in sort of individual self-sovereignty and freedom. But who knows? Maybe I pause saying, hey, folks, things are getting a little out of control here. I don't know if Bitcoin gets to 3, 4, 500K, next cycle. And
probably stands to reason a little bit that with your customers being high conviction Bitcoiners, that they will cool their heels on seeking out your product as well. But I appreciate hearing you say that I found that to be just almost universally true across the Bitcoin world. Am I excited about Bitcoin for me and my wife? Yes. Am I excited about it for my kids? Yes. But it's not like it's not like some sort of insider information that I want to keep to myself so that I maintain the benefit, lest the whole crowd understand the benefit and the arbitrage sort of go away. No, Bitcoin, it can lift all boats. It can help all people win, so to speak. And so on account of that, do I want it for me and my own? I do, but I want it for my neighbors as well. But I'm just guessing that those who are coming to you for your product have that high conviction. And I hope in a way that even though you've demonstrated your conscience, and maybe will I or won't I, what will we do in that moment? Maybe you'll put a pause to it. I'm thinking and hoping in a sense that you don't have to, but I really do.
That's a really good point.
Hearing that from you as well.
That's a really fantastic point. It'll sort of modulate on its own, right? Yeah. By the way, David, just on your point of wanting your neighbors in on it too, I completely agree. That is really the entire inspiration of this. And you may wonder, look, I could work many months, many years on this and close hundreds of millions of dollars worth of these positions. But Michael Saylor comes along and one day buys $1 billion worth of Bitcoin. Doesn't that make me feel like my efforts are just a draw? The reason I really love what we're doing is that I believe that Saylor buying Bitcoin is great. It is great. But I also want Bitcoin to be widely distributed. I want more and more individual Americans around the country to own Bitcoin. Because when they do, what happens is that even our political leaders will start paying attention, right? If all the Bitcoin's owned by one really rich guy, that's not as powerful as a lot of people, everyday Americans across the country owning Bitcoin. And so I'm motivated by broadening the set of folks who own Bitcoin, even though the amount of dollars that Sovana deploys, may pale in comparison to what Michael Saylor can do, right?
I'd be very curious to see where or what people do with that, assuming that they close those positions in profit, right? So like David's talking about applying it to a mortgage payment. If people are thinking about, well, do you just take this and you buy more Bitcoin with it? It's sort of the stacking more as you can. Like, I'd be very curious as you sort of go down the road how people use this, because at least in my life, using your example of, okay, you get a $25,000 check. I have never received that amount of a check just written to me, right? And so at least in my experience, it's a thing to say, well, should something like this happen to me, how am I best going to, we would use the language of like loving our neighbor, right? And not just immediately think about, hey, me, myself, and I, and what I want, now I can have this nice thing, that nice thing, but how can I use it to even help serve, love those people around me, whether it's my family or someone like that too. That'd be super curious to sort of know as you get older, as you do more of these, how people are using their, profit or windfall, if you want to use that kind of language.
Yeah, absolutely. That's part of being new, is that all of that is ahead of us. And so I'm equally excited to figure out, when do folks close these positions?
Right.
If Bitcoin skyrockets 3 months after, even 3 years after, do they close immediately? Do they let it go for the full 5 years? What do they do with that money? Absolutely. All very excited to see how this unfolds.
I sort of am curious. It's maybe a different way of asking the same question, Jared. You're asking how will they use it, but I'm asking internally, who are they? And I can think of like two personas, and I'm curious if you have more. One is exactly me in my scenario. Let's say we're not halfway through our loan, but we're blessed to have a mortgage where basically what's left on the mortgage is half of the equity or half of the value of the entire home. So I owe just as much as my equity piece over here. And so the idea of leveraging the equity I have to maybe retire that. So I'm thinking that's one persona, maybe me. But I'm also thinking of fixed income baby boomers who maybe have become high conviction on Bitcoin, but don't have tremendous cash flow themselves. And are saying, boy, this is a way I could leverage what I have to get a Bitcoin position, whether for dreams or whether for posterity, for children and grandchildren. Have you bumped into any kind of personas in that way? Do you guys think in those terms? Are you coming to think in those terms at all?
It's really all across the board.
Okay.
In age as well. We have folks as young as Jared. We have folks much older than you and me. I'm about your age, David. I'm 1980. And it really is all across the board. The the commonality is A, obviously they own property. B, they are high conviction in Bitcoin. C, I find, at least right now, we'll see how this evolves over time, these tend to be very sober-minded, patient, long-term, balanced individuals. Like, everyone's coming to us from not a place of kind of get rich quick, jump onto the bandwagon, but having done a lot of thought around this, and they're ready to do this right away when we have the capital. That's another thing I notice. Like put another way, it's like folks I'd want to hang out with. Like everyone who's come to us, or like, I could hang out with you. You could be a friend. Because, and we know this about Bitcoiners, right? Like when you meet another Bitcoiner, but another serious Bitcoiner, right? Who's really done the work, who's really spent the time, there's this connection that you feel. So that's where our customers are right now. It'll be interesting to see. I think it's going to remain that way, because unlike other ways of pulling equity out of your home, we don't hand you a stack of cash, right? Other means of getting equity out of your home, they give you money. We don't give you money. So already you have to show some level of patience.
Right.
You're doing something, and at the end of it, congratulations, you don't get cash in your hand. You get something better, right? You get Bitcoin in a secure account with no margin call, no mark to market for 5 years. I think that's better. And so that also draws a certain type of customer to us.
That's excellent. Okay, now if there's a curveball, here's it. Thinking of your kids, thinking of my kids, thinking of Jared, I don't know about your kids really, but do you anticipate, do you have any dreams for any other products? I guess I can put it that generally.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, not only that, but I think of this as just the first product. It's really just the base layer, that foundational layer upon which we want to offer other services. My first priority is to get people the lifeboat or the life vest, right? If, Bitcoin's often compared to a rocket ship, and that's fun too. I love that. I love the rocket emoji as much as anyone. I love that too. I like a nice green candle as much as anyone. But I've always thought the better metaphor for Bitcoin is that of a lifeboat. It's what's going to save us from the oncoming debasement of the currency that we're already starting to experience, unfortunately, now. And if we believe, and we do, that Bitcoin is this lifeboat, the first and most important thing is to make sure everyone has one, right? Because if you don't own Bitcoin, then nothing else matters. So our first step is get people owning Bitcoin, and that's what our first product does. Once you have Bitcoin, then we can figure out ways to now tap into your newly found Bitcoin wealth. For example, I think there's ways to borrow against your Bitcoin responsibly and prudently. And so that is the next step. I think custody solutions, once you have Bitcoin wealth, now you're worried about, as you should be, how do I custody this correctly and safely for the next generation? So custody products could be another follow-on. And so we really see this as just the base foundational layer of, and we'll listen to our customers too, right? What else do our customers want beyond this product? So it really is just a starting point.
That's excellent. And how big is the team at Sovana?
We're very lean. We are. It's co-founded by me and Mitch and Chase as well, whom you met
right.
is also he's also a longtime Bitcoiner. He was the co-founder and CEO of a Bitcoin company, Acropolis, which was in the Bitcoin custody space. So that's an easy thing for us to segue into once we have this foundational layer built.
Awesome. Well, and I would encourage our hearers to go to Sovana.io and play with particularly your calculator there. You can, type in your own situation, or you could even, kind of make believe, put in some test cases so that you can kind of see your situation or compare a couple and see what is available to you. That calculator really helped me get my brain around what would be possible. And of course, even as I talked with my wife, what you would possibly allow me to take out as a lien against the home might also be very different from what I actually do. I might be more conservative still, and likely would be. So your calculator's there. I see some conservatism in your own calculator and what you allow, even based on my equity, and I can move the needle further. But you have, I think, an insight. Yeah, it's great. I would just encourage people to go there and play around it. I'm really admire how clean your product is, the clear vision that you have. And I think you have a very unique product. There are a few other products coming out around homes, around Bitcoin and borrowing from homes, or tapping into the equity of your home. I don't know of any. For me, you stand head and shoulders above what I've otherwise seen. Maybe I've not seen it all, but and your accessibility and generosity to come on and be with us, I truly thank you for it.
It's really my pleasure, David. Really great to talk to you. Really great to meet you, Jared. Thank you so much for having me on.
Absolutely.
Great.
Absolutely.
And in terms of wrapping this up, and one thing for our hearers, Jared and I, along with our buddy Ben, who's not with us today, believe that there's also a natural gravity of many Christians to Bitcoin as well. And I can sum it up real quickly, and whether I'm giving that to you, Sanjay, as something to consider, or just our hearers, there's this phrase in the Bitcoin world: don't trust, verify. And I can actually say in a way that the Apostle Paul got there first and said, hey, this Christian faith may be different than many, if not most or all other religions. It offers an Achilles heel and says, here's our Achilles heel, that we don't just speak of a moral teacher, we don't speak of platitudes, we don't simply speak of commandments or morals, but rather all of this hinges on whether a man named Jesus Christ lived, died, and here's the big one, rose again. And Paul even says, here's the Achilles heel, don't trust me, go verify this for yourself, see if it has validity or not, that Christ rose from the dead. He goes so far in 1 Corinthians 15 to say, if he did not rise, then your faith is in vain. Go do something else, right? This is an empty husk. And he actually adds one piece further still. And if he didn't rise from the dead and you're saying that he did, and there is a God out there, that God might in fact be a little upset with you for misrepresenting him. So it all hangs on the resurrection of Christ. Don't trust, verify. So I'd say that to our hearers as a connection of sorts to this topic today, and those first principles that you started from, Sanjay, that go check out the first principles on things, test it out. Don't even worry about the whole of it, but get down to the core of things. And so with Bitcoin, that would be, what did you say? You said it early on. Is this real, and will it persist? I liked those two descriptors that you gave, Sanjay, and how you were framing it. Is it real, and will it persist? And the Christian faith basically says the same thing. Here's the grounds upon which you could measure it and find it to not be real, in which case, dismiss it, go away, find something else, have fun doing other things. But if it's real, this is of maximum importance for you and for all. So, Sanjay, great to have you. Thank you again so much. We'll be watching very eagerly happenings with Sovana. Who knows, maybe a couple years from now, well, you'll probably be busier and in higher demand. I think that'll be true, actually. But we'll be watching maybe for a different kind of product, a product for the Jareds of this world, and maybe have you back on to speak of it. But again, to our listeners, thanks for listening. We hope this was profitable for you, and we truly do hope you take the time also to go over, don't trust us, but go trust, verify, and check out Sovana.io. And I got that right, SOV.
Thank you guys so much.